The cover song, a way for an artist to pay tribute to an artist that influenced them, or to interpret a song in a new way. In the 1950s, with the exception of a small handful of artists, most acts in the first wave of rock and roll relied heavily on covers. This could have been that the label needed filler songs for an upcoming album, or the label wanted to reach different markets with already established songs. But for the most part, I think artists themselves generally loved the original song and wanted to bring it into their act. Most of the guys from rock's first era had a deep love and respect for blues music, and I wanted to look at some that really stand out. With all due respect to the original artists, that's not to say these are better, more that they really take the song somewhere else. I'm not going to do any sort of a ranking here, this is just a list, and some of these are on the more obscure side. Also, only one song per artist, and the artist has to have a general love for the original song, so no watered down, cash grab covers. Sorry, Pat Boone. That said, let's look at 10 great blues and rhythm and blues songs covered by rock and rollers. Number 10, Valley of Tears by Buddy Holly.
Everyone understands me in the Valley of Tears.
Valley of Tears was written by Fats Domino and Dave Bartholomew and first recorded by Fats Domino in 1957. The record was released in April of that year and reached number 2 on Billboard's R&B chart. Not only that, but its B-side, It's You I Love, reached number 6. By 1957, Fats Domino was at the top of his game. He was on tour for most of that year and had acquired 50 suits, 100 pairs of shoes, and even a $1,500 diamond horseshoe stick pin.
Everyone understands me in the Valley of Tears.
Fats Domino's Valley of Tears has a sound recognizable to anyone familiar with the New Orleans rhythm and blues style. The bass carries the song, and Fats's vocal works very nicely with the soaring voices of the female backup singers. Buddy Holly recorded his version of Valley of Tears between May and July of 1957. Buddy's brother Larry suggested the song to him, as he had a couple of other tracks Buddy covered. Buddy's producer Norman Petty's wife Vi Petty plays the organ on the track, taking the place of the backup singers on Fats' version, giving it a rather otherworldly feel. Buddy Holly's version of Valley of Tears is a lot cleaner in sound than the Fats Domino version, and was included on his second album, where he experimented a lot more with recording techniques and instrumentation, and is a reminder of an artist that was taken from us a million times too soon. Number 9, Right String Baby But the Wrong Yo-Yo by Carl Perkins.
Right string baby but the wrong yo-yo. You're trying to do me like I did before.
Right String Baby But the Wrong Yo-Yo was written by Piano Red, and first recorded by him in December of 1950. Piano Red, or Willie Lee Perryman, based his song off of a 1929 jazz song with the same title by Douglas Fennell and his Royal Stompers.
You got the right string, baby, but the wrong yo-yo.
But the verses are quite different. Piano Red was an albino, as was his brother Rufus, and because of that they both had very poor eyesight, meaning they taught themselves how to play piano by ear. Rufus had a music career as well under the name Speckled Red. Piano Red developed his style by playing juke joints and house parties around the South in the 30s and 40s, but didn't begin recording professionally until 1950 with Rockin' with Red. By the mid-1950s he had his own radio show, The Piano Red Show, broadcast out of a shack in his backyard. He continued to record as well, eventually adopting another stage name, Dr. Feelgood, and having a successful run in Europe.
Right string, baby, but the wrong yo-yo. Somebody knocking on your door.
Piano Red's original version of Right String Baby But the Wrong Yo-Yo features his aggressive piano style that he's known for. It conjures up images of being in a juke joint in the early 50s. It's a party, and it's a lot of fun. Carl Perkins recorded his version of Right String Baby But the Wrong Yo-Yo in March of 1956, in the same session that also saw All Mama's Children. Shortly after this session, within the same month in fact, Carl and his group saw a major setback in their career. On March 22nd, while on the road to play the Perry Como show in New York City, their driver fell asleep at the wheel and crashed into a poultry truck. Everyone in Carl's car, except for the drummer, W.S. Holland, was seriously injured. Carl had been thrown from the car and was lying face down in a dish of water. W.S. Holland picked him up and saved his life. Sadly, the driver of the poultry truck was killed. Carl Perkins' version of Right String Baby But the Wrong Yo-Yo is playful, and the rhythm section comes on like a freight train. Number 8, Big-Legged Woman by Jerry Lee Lewis.
Big-legged woman, keep your dresses down. You got something, baby, that'll make a bulldog a hound.
Big-Legged Woman was written by Johnny Temple and first recorded by him on October 17, 1938. Temple had moved to Chicago in the early 30s and started playing the clubs. Soon he attracted Decca Records, who began recording him in 1935. His biggest hit would come with Louise Louise Blues in 1936, and by the end of his run with Decca, he had released a couple dozen singles. He continued recording and performing until 1949, when he chose to just perform, eventually giving up the blues altogether and becoming a minister. Johnny Temple was known for his guitar playing, which makes Big-Legged Woman stand out in his discography, as it's led by a piano and clarinet.
Big leg woman, I'll keep you dresses down. You got something make you bulldog, huggy hound.
Johnny Temple was known for other risque blues songs, including Peeping Through the Keyhole and Gimme Some of That Yum Yum Yum, and Big-Legged Woman fits nicely in this subgenre of risque blues. Jerry Lee Lewis recorded Big-Legged Woman in July of 1958 in the same session that produced Break Up. As a kid growing up in Faraday, Louisiana, Jerry Lee liked to sneak off to a blacks-only night spot called Haney's Big House to listen to the blues from the back door. It's clear to anyone that listens to Jerry Lee play piano that much of his sound came from absorbing the sound of these barroom piano players, and Big-Legged Woman is the embodiment of that. From the cocky attitude, his pumping piano style, and overactive libido, this is Jerry Lee Lewis fully realized. The song goes back and forth from thinly veiled innuendo to just coming right out and saying it.
I'll bet my bottom dollar there ain't a cherry in this house. Big-legged mama.
While on his first big hit, Whole Lotta Shakin' Going On, Jerry Lee Lewis may have told his girl to wiggle around a little bit. On Big-Legged Woman, he makes it explicitly clear what's on his mind.
You gonna lose your nightgown.
Number 7, My Baby Left Me by Elvis Presley.
Just my baby left me, never said a word.
My Baby Left Me was written and first recorded by Arthur Big Boy Crudup in 1950. Crudup learned to play from a blues man named Papa Harvey, and was soon playing dance halls around Forest, Mississippi before heading to Chicago in 1940. Chicago was rough for him and he barely made a living before record producer Lester Melrose took interest in him and signed him to RCA's Bluebird label. Crudup recorded for a number of labels throughout his career, but soon got tired of making next to nothing while his labels got rich, and mostly quit recording in the early 50s, outside of a few sides he cut in 1965. Crudup moved from Mississippi to Virginia and took up a job as a field laborer and a bootlegger selling moonshine to local bars around Virginia. The fight for royalties continued, with only a few wins in his favor until his death on March 28, 1974.
My baby left me, never said a word.
Arthur Big Boy Crudup's sound is very raw and rural, much like the Delta blues musicians, but his also features a full band, and it's this mixture of styles that I can completely understand why he was often billed as the father of rock and roll. Elvis Presley absolutely loved Arthur Big Boy Crudup. He once said, "If I had any ambition, it was to be as good as Arthur Crudup." Down in Tupelo, Mississippi, I used to hear old Arthur Crudup bang his box the way I do now, and I said if I ever got to a place I could feel all that old Arthur felt, I'd be a music man like nobody ever saw. Elvis's idol worship led him to not only cover Crudup's That's Alright Mama as his first record, but also So Glad You're Mine, and of course My Baby Left Me, which he recorded on January 30th, 1956 in New York City. Elvis's version of My Baby Left Me is one of my favorite rockabilly tracks of all time. Drummer DJ Fontana and bassist Bill Black start things off, Scotty Moore sets the groove on lead guitar, and Elvis just sells it. Number 6, Mill Cow Blues by Eddie Cochran.
Well, I woke up this morning, looked out the door.
Milk Cow Blues was written by Kokomo Arnold and originally recorded by him in September of 1934. Kokomo, real name James Arnold, was making a living as a bootlegger in Chicago in 1929 when he decided to make his first recording under the name Get Fiddle Jim. He moved to Chicago just as Prohibition ended, meaning he needed to find a new way to make a living. This came when Decca Records offered him a recording contract. He started being known as Kokomo Arnold after releasing his record Old Original Kokomo Blues, a song Robert Johnson would later rework as Sweet Home Chicago in 1936. Milk Cow Blues became something of a genre-hopping standard, as it was recorded by country artists like Johnny Lee Wills, whose brother Bob Wills reworked the song into Brain Cloudy Blues.
My brain is cloudy, my soul is upside down. Terrible, terrible.
And Elvis even cut a rockabilly version of Milk Cow Blues while he was at Sun Records. Between his first session in September of 1934 to May of 1938, Kokomo cut 88 songs before deciding to leave the music industry altogether and work in a factory, with no interest in playing again, even as the popularity of folk music in the 60s was seeing many of his peers rediscovered. Kokomo died in Chicago on November 8, 1968.
As I woke up this morning and I looked outdoors.
Kokomo Arnold's version of Milk Cow Blues has a raw Delta sound, with his left-handed slide guitar sound, as well as the falsetto at the end of every line of the bridge really catching the ear.
Please quit your low-down ways.
Eddie Cochran started out as a member of a country duo called the Cochran Brothers with Hank Cochran, who wasn't actually related to him. Their singles did okay, but Eddie started to be drawn to rock and roll, and was also an in-demand session musician, so the act eventually broke up. Hank went on to be a successful songwriter in Nashville, writing country standards like She's Got You and I Fall to Pieces for Patsy Cline, and Make the World Go Away. Eddie stayed in California, being so successful as a rock and roll artist that he became a fixture on Alan Freed's rock and roll package tours, and even made a few movies. Arguably his biggest hit came with his song Summertime Blues, which reached number 8 in 1958. Eddie recorded his version of Kokomo Arnold's Milk Cow Blues on August 25, 1959. The studio version wasn't released until after Eddie's death in April of 1960, but he did perform the song live on that final tour in England, including an appearance on Marty Wilde's Boy Meets Girls. If I was to point to one song to showcase how great a Gretsch guitar could sound, it would be Eddie Cochran's Milk Cow Blues. Eddie's voice is playful and a little gritty throughout, and God could he play. Number 5, Black Cadillac by Joyce Green.
Now I'm gonna bump you off, gonna tell you the reason why. You worth more me than daddy, oh, that you is alive. I'm gonna ride in your funeral, daddy in a black Cadillac.
This one isn't so much a cover as it is a reinterpretation. Black Cadillac was written by Joyce Green and her sister Doris in 1959, but its origins go all the way back to Buddy Moss's 1935 recording of Going to Your Funeral in a V8 Ford. Moss began performing at an early age in and around the Atlanta, Georgia area, eventually developing what's known as the Piedmont blues style, a finger-picking guitar style based around ragtime music. He made his first recordings as a member of the Georgia Cotton Pickers in 1930, and didn't record again until 1933, making his first solo records for Arc Records in New York City. By the time he recorded Going to Your Funeral in a V8 Ford, success had allowed Moss to double his fee per song. Ultimately, his career took a major hit when he was arrested in 1936 for shooting his wife, which is ironic given the lyrics of Going to Your Funeral in a V8 Ford. The resulting murder conviction put Moss in prison until 1941, when he was paroled for good behavior. His release came just as the country was heading into World War II, and because of FDR's rations on shellac, he was dropped from his label, who were forced to only press records for their most successful artists. In the lean years, he continued to perform, even seeing a touch of success as the folk movement revitalized his career, as it had other older blues artists. Despite his success in his early career, and influence on so many others in his genre, Moss died mostly forgotten on October 19, 1984.
I'm gonna bump you off, gonna tell you the reason why. You was more than me dead woman, and you is alive. Said I'm gonna ride to your funeral, baby in a V8 Ford.
Buddy Moss's Coming to Your Funeral in a V8 Ford features more technical guitar playing with its heavy ragtime influence. Seeing how things went down with Buddy Moss, it's a little bit uncomfortable to hear a song about killing your woman, but it is what it is. Joyce Green was born in Bradford, Arkansas on March 2, 1940, and learned how to play guitar from her brother when she was 9. Pretty soon, her singing and playing were winning her local talent contests, which led to her singing on the radio and a regular gig at the Oasis Club in Bald Knob, Arkansas. Heavily influenced by Buddy Moss's song, Joyce wrote Black Cadillac with her sister Doris, which grabbed the attention of Arlen Vaden of Vaden Records, who set up a recording session at the KLCN radio station. Vaden Records released Black Cadillac in March of 1959, with Tomorrow on the flip side, and Joyce joined a Carl Perkins tour. Joyce chose to leave the music industry shortly after getting married, and still lives in Bradford, Arkansas today with her husband. With the exception of a few recordings made in the 1970s which were lost in a fire, Black Cadillac and Tomorrow is the only record Joyce ever made. Which is a real shame because Black Cadillac is one of the most exciting female rockabilly records I've ever heard. Joyce Green sings with confidence and power, and you would never tell in a million years that it was her only record. Number 4, The Train Kept A-Rollin' by Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio.
I caught a train, I met a dame. She was a hefty and a real gone dame.
The Train Kept A-Rollin' was written by Tiny Bradshaw, with founder of King Records, Sid Nathan, getting a co-writing credit. Bradshaw was a giant in the world of jazz, swing, and rhythm and blues, and scored his biggest hit with Well Oh Well in 1950, which hit number 2 on the R&B charts. The Train Kept A-Rollin' was based on a 1942 cowboy song called Cow Cow Boogie, which was recorded by Ella Mae Morse. Bradshaw reworked the lyrics a bit, gave it that jump blues sound, and recorded the song with his orchestra on October 6, 1951 in Cincinnati.
I caught the train, I met a real dame. She was a hipster and a gone dame.
Tiny Bradshaw's The Train Kept A-Rollin' has everything you could want in a rhythm and blues record. It has a driving, moderate tempo, a horn section mimicking a train whistle throughout the chorus, and Tiny Bradshaw's great vocal. Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio formed in Memphis and was led by Johnny and Dorsey Burnett, 2 amateur boxers who met guitarist Paul Burleson at a match and decided to form a group in 1951. At one point, Johnny and Dorsey took day jobs at Crown Electric Company in Memphis, where Elvis famously worked as a truck driver before achieving national stardom. After being laid off from Crown, they moved from Memphis to New York City. With their appearance on a nationally televised talent show, the Rock and Roll Trio were soon picked up by Bob Thiel of Coral Records, the man who signed Buddy Holly and the Crickets. It was Bob's idea for the group to crank up the treble on their recordings, giving the lead guitar a biting tone that stood out from everyone else. On July 2, 1956, the trio were in Owen Bradley's studio in Nashville for the first day of a 4-day session where they decided to cover The Train Kept A-Rollin'. Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio's take on Tiny Bradshaw's already excellent original Crank It Up to 11. Lead guitarist Paul Burleson had discovered after dropping his amplifier that the now loose tube created a distorted sound, and he would take to loosening the tube whenever he wanted to get that sound. This wasn't a new concept, as Willie Kizart's amplifier had been damaged en route to Sun Studios to record Rocket 88 with Jackie Brinson and the Delta Cats. But Burleson's octave riff with a hint of distortion sounds incredible. Historically, it's known that a lot of the rockabilly guys abused speed pills, and I'm not saying that Johnny Burnett took part, but with his frenzied vocal on The Train Kept A-Rollin', I wouldn't be surprised. Hold on for this one. Number 3, Red Hot by Billy Lee Riley.
Well, I got a gal, 6 feet 4, sleeps in the kitchen with her feet out the door, but my gal is red hot.
In early blues music, you'll find lyrics get used and reused by numerous artists. How many guys woke up in the morning and found his baby was gone? But Red Hot has fairly distinctive lyrics, so when you hear them elsewhere, they stand out. The earliest I've been able to research the song's origins is Robert Johnson's 1937 record, They're Red Hot.
I got a good such a long tall. She sleeps in the kitchen with a piece in the hall. Hot tamales and the red hot. Yeah, she got 'em for sale on me.
Recorded on November 27, 1936 in a makeshift studio in a room at the Gunter Hotel in San Antonio, Texas, their Red Hot is Robert Johnson singing about a female street vendor selling hot tamales, a popular food in the Delta. In this way, it's similar to Little Richard's I Got It, which is also an ode to street vendors in the Deep South. Though Robert Johnson's song also features a few lyrics that are on the raunchier side. On May 31st, 1955, Sun Records blues artist Billy the Kid Emerson recorded Red Hot. Emerson had come to Sun Records a year before, after meeting Ike Turner, who set up a recording session for him, resulting in his first record, No Teasing Around and If Loving Is Believing. Emerson was backed by a pretty solid band on his Red Hot session, including Calvin Newborn on guitar, who had played on B.B. King's earliest recordings. Sam Phillips released the song on June 21st, 1955, with No Greater Love on the flip side.
My gal is red hot.
Your gal ain't do this squat.
Billy the Kid Emerson's Red Hot is a moderate tempo boogie-woogie dripping with the Memphis blues sound. The call and response chorus is catchy, and there's a great sax solo in the middle. Billy Lee Riley began recording after his discharge from the Army. In 1956, he made his first record for Sun Studios, Trouble Bound, which was released in September of that year. His first hit came in February of the following year with Flying Saucers Rock and Roll, which featured Sun's newest discovery, Jerry Lee Lewis, playing piano on that session. Riley cut his cover of Red Hot in January of 1957 with his group The Little Green Men, and had good reason to believe that he had a hit on his hands when DJ Alan Freed told him how much he loved the record. Unfortunately, by the time the record was released, Jerry Lee Lewis was fast becoming a huge star and had just released Great Balls of Fire. Sam Phillips, with limited money to promote the massive talent he had on his label, chose to back Jerry Lee over Billy. A wound that never really healed for Riley, as evidenced by the 2002 Sun Records documentary Good Rockin' Tonight.
Alan Freed was our godfather back there of music. He told me out of his own mouth, he said, this is a top 5 record. But you dropped it for Great Balls of Fire.
Well, hush your mouth.
Billy Lee Riley took Emerson's original and put a rock and roll polish on it. Roland Jane's 2 guitar solos are really something, and as many times as this song has been covered, nobody has ever matched Billy Lee Riley's version. This song is aptly named Red Hot. Number 2, Boney Maroney by Richie Valens.
Well, I got a gal named Boney Maroney. Well, she's as skinny as a stick of macaroni.
Boney Maroney was written and originally recorded by Larry Williams in 1957, topping out at number 14 on the Billboard charts. Williams had left Oakland, California to move back to his birthplace of New Orleans in 1954. He started working as a valet for his famous cousin, Lloyd Price of Stagger Lee fame. It was through this connection that Williams met Little Richard, who introduced him to the heads of Specialty Records, and Williams was signed. When Little Richard decided to leave the devil's music behind to become a minister, Specialty Records groomed Williams to be something of a replacement. 1957 was his best year with songs like Short Fat Fanny and Boney Maroney, but his personal demons got the best of him. After being busted for drugs and possessing an illegal firearm in 1959, Specialty Records dropped him from the label. Comebacks were attempted to varying degrees of success, but drug abuse, violence, and his side job as a pimp became too much, and he took his own life on January 7th, 1980.
I got a girl named Boney Maroney. She's as skinny as a stick of macaroni.
Listening to Larry Williams' Boney Maroney, you can definitely hear how much Specialty Records was pushing Little Richard's sound on him, as the arrangements are very similar. But Larry Williams still delivers a strong vocal performance. Richie Valens recorded his cover of Boney Maroney on November 25th, 1958 at Gold Star Recording Studios in Hollywood, where Phil Spector would later develop his wall of sound recording technique. Richie was blessed to have top-of-the-line producers, arrangers, and musicians working his recording sessions, and Boney Maroney is no exception. While Larry Williams' version is not bad in any way, it's very similar to the style of Little Richard's recordings. One of the coolest aspects of Richie's version is the use of the Dan Electro Longhorn 6-string bass by session player Renee Hall. The Danelectro was like a normal guitar, but with thicker strings tuned an octave lower, giving Boney Maroney and a couple of other Ritchie songs a distinct sound. Ritchie Valence's Boney Maroney is an excellent rock and roll track. From that rumbling Danelectro intro to Ritchie's amazing vocal, and then there's that guitar solo. Number 1, Fujiyama Mama by Wanda Jackson.
I've been to Nagasaki, Hiroshima too. The same I did to them, baby, I can do to you.
Fujiyama Mama was written by Jack Hammer, the man who wrote Great Balls of Fire for Jerry Lee Lewis. The song was originally recorded by blues singer Ernestine Allen in early 1955. Allen had performed with a lot of the big rhythm and blues groups of the late 1940s and early 50s, like Wynone Harris and Lucky Millinder, before signing with Capitol Records and recording Fujiyama Mama. Allen's version features an arrangement by Howard Biggs, who wrote the charts for a number of doo-wop and R&B classics like Get a Job by the Silhouettes.
I've been to Nagasaki, Hiroshima too. The same I did to them, babe, I can do to you.
I'm not a fan of the arrangement on the Ernestine Allen version of Fujiyama Mama. I think the oriental bells and the loud backing vocals are a bit distracting, and I think it would have benefited from a more stripped-down sound. Wanda Jackson had started out as a country singer who toured and briefly dated Elvis Presley. Elvis was the first to tell her she should try singing rock and roll. In 1956, she signed with Capitol Records and followed Elvis's advice. On September 17, 1957, Wanda recorded her version of Fujiyama Mama at the Capitol Recording Studio in Hollywood. Future country legend Buck Owens played guitar on that session, and the record was released in December of that year, with No Wedding Bells for Joe on the B-side. Wanda got the nickname the Sweet Lady with the Nasty Voice, and Fujiyama Mama is a shining example of this. The song sounds mean, with Wanda delivering low guttural growls and shouts while comparing her energy to an atomic bomb. Her producer Ken Nelson even tried to talk her out of recording it for that very reason, but Wanda insisted. Given the sexual undertones of the song, especially coming from a 19-year-old female singer, it's not surprising that the song failed to chart in the US. But it did go straight to number 1 in Japan, holding that spot for 6 months in 1958. Wanda Jackson's 1959 Japanese tour was a massive success, and Fujiyama Mama was even covered by a number of Japanese artists. Maybe the US couldn't handle the song at the time, but Wanda proved she could hold her own in the male-dominated rock and roll genre and gave rockabilly fans an unbridled masterpiece. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my look at 10 great blues and rhythm and blues songs covered by rock and rollers. If you'd like to be kept up to date as to when I release a new video, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. And if you really want to be notified, hit that bell as well. I'm Brian, and I'll see you next time on Music Corner.